Okay, welcome to Stoic Training. I'm really glad you're here because today we're diving deep into something that might just quietly change the way you see yourself, how others perceive you, and frankly, how much power you hold over your own life. We often think of intelligence as knowing a lot, right? Having all the answers, being quick with a clever comeback. But what if the real secret, the true sign of a deeply intelligent and wise man, isn't found in the words he speaks, but in the ones he never allows himself to utter? What if the phrases we casually let slip are silently eroding our credibility, limiting our potential, and keeping us stuck without us even realizing it? Stick around because I've spent years observing human nature, sometimes with a coffee in hand, sometimes through the timeless lens of ancient Stoic wisdom, and I've noticed something profound. The wisest men I've encountered share a common trait: a profound respect for silence, and a deliberate caution about certain damaging phrases. Today, we're going to uncover 7 of these phrases. These aren't just things to avoid saying to sound smarter. These are linguistic habits that, when eliminated, unlock growth, resilience, and true power. Get ready to look at your own language in a whole new light. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and let's get wiser together. I already know that. This phrase slips out more often than we might like to admit, doesn't it? Yeah, I know that already. On the surface, it sounds confident. Maybe even efficient. You're just confirming you're up to speed, right? But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find something far less appealing: a closed mind. A truly intelligent man understands a fundamental truth. The moment we convince ourselves there's nothing new for us to learn, we've effectively slammed the door shut on our own growth trajectory. This isn't intelligence. It's arrogance cleverly dressed up in the costume of competence. I learned this lesson the hard way years ago. I was working with a mentor, a man who carried himself with that quiet certainty you only get from navigating countless challenges. We were reviewing a process I felt I had mastered, something I'd done 100 times. He started explaining a detail about it, and without even thinking, I just blurted out, "Yeah, I know that already." He paused, gave me this look, calm but heavy, like he saw something I couldn't, and just moved on. It wasn't until later that evening that the weight of what I had done truly hit me. I hadn't just interrupted him. I had robbed myself of a crucial opportunity. His years of experience held insights, nuances, and practical wisdom that weren't written in any manual or outlined in any training video I'd ever seen. These were things I hadn't lived long enough to understand on my own. By saying I already know that, what I was really declaring was, I have nothing left to learn from you or from this situation. Stoic philosophy cuts right through this illusion of knowing it all. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, warned us plainly, you cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything. He understood that our ego, that deep-seated need to appear knowledgeable and protect the image we've built of ourselves, paradoxically becomes the very obstacle blocking our path to deeper understanding and growth. It convinces us we're standing on solid, unshakable ground, when in reality, we're precariously balancing on the fragile peak of pride. Intelligent men grasp that knowledge isn't like a trophy you win once and place on a shelf to admire. It's more like a dynamic, ever-moving river. You can step into the same place twice, but the water itself is different every time. I remember watching a seasoned carpenter once. An apprentice, eager and maybe a little nervous, was explaining a technique the older man had likely perfected decades prior. The carpenter listened patiently, nodded, asked clarifying questions, and even sincerely thanked the young man for sharing. Later, I couldn't help but ask him why he didn't just cut the kid off and tell him he knew it all. He just smiled and said, "Because sometimes you learn more just by listening to the way someone else sees it, even if it's something you've done 1,000 times. That, my friends, is genuine wisdom. It's a form of intelligence that doesn't feel the need to announce itself or broadcast its expertise. So, the next time you feel that familiar thought bubble up, I've heard this before. Take a conscious breath. Practice the pause. Listen anyway. Not because you're humoring the other person, but because you might genuinely catch something new. It could be a small detail you missed, a subtle shift in perspective, a nuance that deepens your understanding in a way you didn't anticipate. And even if you don't learn a new technique, you practice humility. You show respect. You cultivate the kind of presence that makes you someone worth listening to in the future. In Stoicism, this is a form of self-mastery, the ability to consciously set aside your pride and ego in favor of clarity and potential growth. It's the quiet strength to remain a student of life, always curious, always open, and in the long run, that's the kind of intelligence that truly endures and serves you best. That's impossible. Several years ago, I worked closely with a man named Robert. He was undoubtedly sharp, highly experienced, the kind of leader who seemed capable of carrying the weight of the entire company on his shoulders without ever showing the strain. Yet, there was this one phrase he used habitually, almost like a verbal tic. That's impossible. Anytime a new idea was floated, a proposal to explore a different market, a suggestion to streamline an outdated system, even a creative approach to handling a difficult client, he'd dismiss it instantly with those two words. At first, it sounded practical, even responsible. After all, who has time or resources to waste chasing pipe dreams, right? But as time went on, a painfully clear pattern emerged. Every single time he declared something impossible, he wasn't actually describing the situation itself. He was describing himself. He was articulating his own perceived limits, his own fear, his own lack of imagination in that moment. The Stoics had a deep understanding of this kind of thinking. Seneca, another pillar of Stoic thought, famously wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And that was precisely Robert's trap. He wasn't analyzing the situation objectively based on external facts. He was projecting his internal fears onto it. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown path, fear of being wrong, fear of trying his best and still falling short. It's a quiet, insidious kind of fear. It doesn't look like panic. It wears the convincing mask of logic, cautiousness, and practicality. But underneath that mask is the very thing that keeps us small, stuck, and prevents us from even starting. The limiting belief that if we can't clearly see the entire path laid out before us, we shouldn't dare to take the very first step. Stoic philosophy offers a powerful counterpoint to this self-imposed paralysis. It reminds us that the obstacle isn't the external problem itself. What truly defeats us is our perception of the obstacle, our interpretation, our judgment, our fear-fueled label of impossible. I've witnessed this transformation firsthand. Years after working with Robert, I was involved in a challenging project. The budget was extremely tight, the timeline felt unreasonably short, and the team was relatively inexperienced. Every logical bone in my body screamed that it simply couldn't be done. But instead of defaulting to, "That's impossible," I consciously chose a different approach. I shifted my focus inward, asking myself, what can I control right here, right now? What is the very next small, manageable step I can take? That project, against all perceived odds, turned out to be one of the most successful I've ever worked on. Not because we suddenly gained superpowers or performed some kind of miracle, but because we collectively refused to be paralyzed by the overwhelming scope of the challenge. We stayed relentlessly focused on taking that next step, and then the one after that. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realizing and acting on that simple truth became the critical difference. When a man says, "That's impossible," he is, in essence, declaring defeat before the fight has even begun. Intelligent men, however, know that what often feels impossible is frequently just unfamiliar. It's not an insurmountable wall. It's a challenging invitation to step forward, even when the path is unclear. They understand that genuine strength isn't forged by winning every single battle without effort. It's built through the discipline of showing up, again and again, taking that next step, especially when the odds seem stacked against you. That persistent courage, that disciplined action in the face of perceived impossibility, is the very essence of Stoic courage. Life constantly asks us to do difficult things, things that push us beyond our comfort zones and challenge our perceived limits. The moment we label them impossible, we effectively close the door on our own potential, our own capacity to rise to the occasion. But the man who consciously chooses to take the next step, no matter how small or daunting it appears, begins to open doors that no one else trapped by the label of impossible can even see. That isn't just intelligence. That is wisdom forged in the crucible of effort and courageous action. That's not my fault. Let's talk about one of the most subtly damaging sentences a man can utter. That's not my fault. It sounds so simple, so often justified in the moment, doesn't it? When something goes wrong, at work, in a relationship, in life in general, there's a natural, almost reflexive urge to defend ourselves, to quickly make it clear that the blame lies somewhere, or with someone else. But here is a profound, and often overlooked truth. Every single time we push responsibility away, even if it feels deserved, we are simultaneously handing over our power along with it. Intelligent men understand this deeply. They've learned, sometimes through painful experience, that responsibility isn't primarily about blame or guilt. It's about influence. It's about your ability to impact the situation, to learn from it, and to affect the outcome moving forward. And if you flat out refuse to take any responsibility, even for just a small piece of what went wrong, you automatically surrender your chance to be part of the solution. I watched this dynamic play out years ago with a friend, let's call him Michael. He lost a major client, a significant blow to his business. His immediate reaction was to explain in painstaking detail exactly why it wasn't his fault. The client was inherently difficult, he argued. The market conditions had shifted unexpectedly. His team members had missed crucial deadlines, and to a degree much of what he said was objectively true. But while he was completely absorbed in meticulously explaining why he wasn't to blame, the invaluable opportunity to learn from the entire, painful experience, to identify what he could do differently next time, and to improve his own process silently slipped away. He remained stuck, repeating the same patterns, genuinely convinced that the problem was always external, always someone else's to fix. What he tragically failed to realize was that by refusing to claim any responsibility, he gave up the one thing that could have truly changed his future outcomes: control over himself and his own actions. The Stoics were crystal clear on this principle. They taught that we should diligently focus our energy and attention on what is truly within our control and consciously release our attachment to everything else: the external events, the actions of others, the past. Epictetus, the former slave who became a profound Stoic teacher, stated it simply: "It is not what happened to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that, right there, is the absolute key. When we utter the phrase, "That's not my fault," we are effectively placing the power to change or fix the situation squarely in someone else's hands. We become passive, waiting for them to somehow make amends, to do better, to magically fix the external circumstances. But the moment we choose to accept even a small piece of responsibility, acknowledging our communication could have been clearer, admitting we could have prepared more thoroughly, even if others made more significant errors, we immediately reclaim a profound sense of control. We shift from being passive recipients of circumstance to active agents of change. We transition from feeling powerless to realizing our own inherent capacity for influence. In my own life, I've found that consciously owning my part in difficult situations, no matter how small it might seem in the grand scheme of things, consistently opens doors I wouldn't have seen otherwise. It might be as simple as saying, "You know what, I realize I wasn't as clear as I could have been in that email." Or looking back, I could have prepared better for that meeting. Even if others bore the brunt of the responsibility, that willingness to take responsibility for my piece shifts something powerful internally. It builds trust, both with yourself and with those around you who witness it. It signals that you are the kind of man who doesn't wait around to be rescued, to be vindicated, or for the external world to change. You are a man who acts. Blame is undeniably easy. It's a quick way to feel momentarily free from discomfort. Responsibility, on the other hand, is hard. It requires courage, honesty, and humility. But responsibility is precisely where true strength resides. The Stoics constantly remind us that we are not here in life to escape difficulties or challenging situations. Our purpose is to rise above them, to learn from them, to become stronger because of them. And that rising, that growth, absolutely begins with asking yourself the critical question, what can I do differently next time? That is the quiet power of intelligent men. They don't lead by finding fault in others. They lead by finding a way forward, starting with themselves. If these insights are resonating with you, please let me know by dropping a yes in the comments below. Your thoughts and experiences matter, and I genuinely love hearing from you. I don't need any help. Now, let's confront one of the most persistent and dangerous lies a man can tell himself, and often, the world. I don't need any help. On the surface, this phrase feels strong, independent, even noble, doesn't it? We've been conditioned by culture to admire the lone wolf, the self-made individual who carves his own path and stoically bears his burdens without a single complaint or visible sign of struggle. But the truth hidden beneath that seemingly heroic exterior is far less glamorous and significantly more detrimental. The refusal to ask for help is, more often than not a reflection of genuine strength. It's a manifestation of pride, a quiet, corrosive force that blinds us to reality and isolates us. It traps us in the belief that struggling in silence is somehow a virtue, a test of our resilience. Over time, this isolation actually erodes the very inner strength and resilience we mistakenly think we are protecting. I was powerfully reminded of this when I was reading about Abraham Lincoln, especially during the darkest, most brutal days of the American Civil War. History often paints him as this solitary, almost mythical figure, burdened by the weight of a fractured nation, stoic and alone. But what is frequently overlooked, or at least not emphasized enough, is how profoundly and intentionally Lincoln leaned on others. He didn't pretend to have all the answers, not even close. He surrounded himself with a cabinet of advisors, famously called the team of rivals, people who often disagreed with him, who challenged his thinking, and whose opinions frequently contradicted his own. He sought out these differing perspectives not because he lacked confidence in his own judgment, but because he possessed the rare and profound wisdom to understand that true insight and effective leadership aren't born in isolation. They are shaped, refined, and strengthened through the courage to admit you don't possess perfect foresight or all the necessary information yourself. Think about it. During the brutal conflict at Antietam, despite significant professional disagreements with General McClellan, Lincoln personally visited him at his headquarters, actively seeking strategic insight. He spent countless hours engaging with his diverse cabinet, valuing their perspectives even when they sharply clashed with his own deeply held beliefs. This wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a demonstration of immense strength, measured by his humility and his commitment to finding the best path forward, regardless of where the insight came from. And that, my friends, is a crucial lesson that intelligent men eventually learn. Sometimes the easy way, often the hard way. Self-reliance is incredibly important. It's a necessary foundation, but it was never intended to be an absolute, impermeable barrier. The Stoics were exceptionally clear on our interconnectedness. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man in the world during his time, wrote openly and repeatedly in his personal journal, Meditations, about the enormous debt he owed to his mentors, his teachers, his family, and his friends. He meticulously cataloged the specific lessons, virtues, and insights he had absorbed from each of them, openly acknowledging how their wisdom had profoundly shaped his own character and understanding of the world. The most powerful emperor on earth didn't feel the need to pretend he had all the answers or that he achieved everything alone. Why on earth do so many of us feel compelled to do just that? Yet far too many of us fall into this trap. We tell ourselves that asking for help is a clear admission of defeat, proof that we've somehow failed to be strong enough. We internalize the message that if we reach out for support, it means we're incapable. But this belief is a cunning trap. It keeps us locked inside the confines of our own heads, struggling in isolation, often slowly drowning in problems and burdens that we were genuinely never meant to carry entirely by ourselves. And perhaps worst of all, it robs the people around us, our friends, family, colleagues, of the chance to offer their unique skills, perspectives, and support. When we adamantly refuse to ask for help, we effectively deny others the fundamental human opportunity to give, to contribute, to connect. 2. We cut off the vital flow of mutual support and cooperation that is meant to bind people together and strengthen communities. I've definitely fallen into this trap myself in the past. There was a period in my life when I genuinely believed I had to carry everything. The demands of work, the responsibilities of family, the endless internal and external pressures that come with trying to live up to some internalized image of what strength looks like. I thought that keeping it together meant rigidly keeping it all to myself, internalizing every stressor, solving every problem in solitude. And all it did, over time, was wear me down to the bone. The crucial turning point for me came when I finally, hesitantly, admitted to someone I trusted deeply that I simply couldn't do it all alone anymore. And what I found wasn't judgment or disappointment, but immediate, genuine understanding and support. That small, vulnerable moment of humility didn't diminish me. It gave me the energy, the clarity, and the renewed perspective I had been desperately missing for years. I realized, with profound clarity, that true strength isn't measured by how long or how effectively you can stand completely alone against the storm. It's defined by knowing when and having the courage to reach out a hand for help, and equally, knowing when to humbly accept the hand that is offered to you. The Stoics consistently teach us that we are fundamentally part of a larger, whole, interconnected community. We are, as Epictetus reminds us, made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. We are built for mutual aid, for supporting one another. When we pretend otherwise, when we insist we are islands unto ourselves, we are fighting against the very natural order of life. Strength is not diminished by asking for help. In fact, it is often profoundly defined by it, because asking for help requires a deep well of courage. It requires radical honesty about our own limitations in that moment. And those qualities, courage and honesty, are unmistakable hallmarks of an intelligent, truly wise man who understands that trying to carry all of life's burdens in complete solitude isn't noble. It is quite simply unnecessary and ultimately detrimental. So the next time you feel that familiar stubborn pull to say, "I've got this, I don't need anyone," pause for just a moment. Ask yourself honestly, is that genuine strength speaking? Or is it just pride cleverly disguised, trying to keep you isolated? And remember Lincoln, who led a nation through its darkest hour, not by pretending he had all the answers, but by wisely and humbly leaning on the collective strength and wisdom of others, knowing full well that even the strongest men need the support of others to stand tall and navigate the impossible challenges. I'm too old for that. Here's another deeply limiting belief, one that can subtly poison our potential and rob us of future fulfillment. I'm too old for that. This phrase can slip out almost innocuously sometimes, perhaps disguised as practical reasoning, realistically, at my age, or even self-deprecating humor. Haha, yeah right, me trying that now. But beneath that casual exterior lies something much heavier, much more significant, a quiet resignation. It's the belief that the best, most exciting, most dynamic chapters of our lives are already written, already behind us, and that there's little left in the future truly worth pursuing with passion or effort. It's the kind of internal declaration that closes doors long before they actually need to be closed, based on an arbitrary number rather than genuine capacity or desire. Intelligent men recognize this phrase for what it is, not just a statement about age, but a toxic mindset. It becomes a slow, insidious erosion of purpose, a quiet surrender of the potential that still exists within the life that is undeniably still there to be lived. I was deeply struck by the story of a man named Harry Bernstein. Imagine this. At the remarkable age of 93 years old, after spending his entire working life as a magazine editor and raising a family, he made a conscious decision to write his very first book. He poured his memories into it, creating a memoir about his childhood experiences in a poor English mill town, titled The Invisible Wall. It was a story about division, prejudice, and resilience. The manuscript faced rejection from several publishers before it was finally accepted. He was 96 when the book finally hit the shelves. And the story doesn't end there. That book went on to achieve international acclaim, translated into multiple languages, touching the lives and hearts of people around the world. But Harry didn't stop there either. He went on to write 3 more books after that, all published, when he was well into his late 90s and beyond. Harry Bernstein simply didn't buy into the debilitating lie that he was too old. He didn't tell himself it was too late, that his time had passed, or that he was finished. He had a story burning inside him, something meaningful to create and share, and he simply did it, regardless of his age. What resonated with me most profoundly about Harry's story wasn't necessarily the unexpected international success. It was the sheer, quiet courage he displayed. The courage to believe, against conventional wisdom and perhaps even his own initial doubts, that life still held more possibilities for him, that even in his 90s, he wasn't finished growing, wasn't finished learning, wasn't finished contributing something valuable to the world. And that kind of courage, that spark of possibility, isn't exclusive to remarkable individuals like Harry Bernstein. It's a choice that each of us faces, sometimes daily. Do we listen to the voice of resignation that tells us we've missed our chance, that the ship has sailed? Or do we consciously choose to embrace the profound possibility that as long as we still have breath in our lungs, we still have purpose, potential, and the capacity for new beginnings? The Stoics taught that, in the grand scheme of the soul and our capacity for virtue and wisdom, age itself means nothing. Marcus Aurelius frequently reflected on the unavoidable truth of his own mortality, not to be morbid or depressing, but precisely to sharpen his sense of urgency and purpose in the present moment. He reminded himself that death is an inevitable part of the natural order, yes, but until that moment arrives, our fundamental duty remains to live as fully, as virtuously, and as meaningfully as we possibly can right now. He believed, as did other Stoics, that true wisdom isn't automatically granted by the mere passing of years. Wisdom deepens with age in those who remain curious, courageous, and committed to learning and applying what they learn. Growth doesn't abruptly stop at a certain age. If anything, the later years offer the potential for that growth, to mature, to ripen into something truly rich and valuable. I've personally seen men in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s learn entirely new skills, start successful businesses, passionately mentor younger generations, and embark on entirely new phases of life with incredible energy and purpose. And I've also known others, younger in years, who allowed the perceived weight of past regrets and the simple march of time convince them to retreat from life, to settle into a quiet state of waiting for the end. The fundamental difference between these two groups wasn't their circumstance or their chronological age. It was their mindset. The man who says, "I'm too old for that," has already in his mind closed the door on future possibilities. But the man who chooses to ask, "Given where I am right now, what can I do next? What is possible for me now?" opens that door wide again, inviting in new experiences, new learning, and new purpose. Age doesn't disqualify us from living boldly, from pursuing new interests, or from contributing to the world. In fact, the experience, perspective, clarity, and resilience that often come with age are not signs that someone is finished. They are powerful tools, sharp, honed, and deeply valuable for someone who is just getting started on a new phase of life, or perhaps finally bringing decades of accumulated wisdom to bear on a long-held dream. And that, ultimately, is the Stoic path in later life: to keep learning, keep striving, keep engaging with the world and yourself, until the very last possible moment. Because as long as we are here, as long as we have breath, there is still meaningful work to be done, still growth to be had, still wisdom to be embodied and shared. If what you just heard resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of possibility, please give this video a like. And definitely subscribe, because every time I discover a new perspective on life that can help us live better, I want you to be the very first to hear about it. I'll do it later. Now let's talk about a phrase that sounds incredibly harmless, even reasonable on the surface, but which is in fact one of the most seductive and profoundly destructive sentences we routinely tell ourselves. I'll do it later. It's a promise, isn't it? a comforting assurance that we'll get to it eventually, when the time is right, when things settle down. But the harsh, often heartbreaking truth is that later all too often becomes the quiet graveyard where most of our best intentions, our most important actions, and our most heartfelt connections are silently buried, never to be resurrected. Wise men understand the devastating reality of this delay. Many have learned the hard way that postponing what truly matters doesn't actually buy you more time. Paradoxically, it robs you of it. Every time we tell ourselves we'll make that important phone call tomorrow, that we'll finally offer that apology next week, that we'll start that creative project or difficult conversation when things at work or home settle down, we are making a dangerous gamble with the one thing we have absolutely no control over: time itself. I once knew a man named Thomas. By any conventional measure, he was incredibly successful. A thriving business he built from the ground up, a beautiful, supportive family, deep respect within his community. But he was also perpetually busy, always something demanding his attention, always a fire to put out. He would often tell himself that he'd spend more quality time with his aging father later, when things at the office weren't quite so hectic. When that big project was finally completed, he postponed the fishing trip they had planned for years. He delayed calling just to chat, to hear his father's voice. He pushed back visiting him, just to sit and talk, telling himself he needed to prioritize urgent work matters. And then, as it always does for everyone, one day, later, simply ran out. His father passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. Thomas was left with a phone full of unsent text messages he'd drafted but never sent, a calendar full of postponed plans, and a heart overflowing with things he desperately wished he had said but never got the chance to. He shared this painful experience with me years later, not seeking sympathy, but offering it as a solemn warning. We live under the illusion that we have an abundance of time, right up until the moment we suddenly realize with crushing finality that we don't. Stoics were painfully, bracingly clear-eyed about this reality. Marcus Aurelius wasn't being morbid when he reminded himself daily of his own mortality. He was practicing a fundamental Stoic discipline precisely to sharpen his sense of urgency and purpose in the present moment. He wrote, as if speaking directly to himself and to us, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That isn't just a dark philosophical thought experiment. It's a powerful, transformative practice. It's a mindset that intelligent men consciously adopt and cultivate because they deeply understand that the clock is absolutely not in their hands. Time doesn't patiently wait for us to feel perfectly ready, perfectly inspired, or perfectly free of other obligations. It doesn't care about our carefully laid plans or our well-intentioned promises to ourselves about later. What we choose to delay today, what we postpone because it feels uncomfortable or difficult or simply not urgent enough in the moment, we may very well never, ever get the chance to do tomorrow. That, my friends, is precisely why wise men choose to act now. They make the phone call they've been dreading or putting off. They take the first uncomfortable step toward healing a strained or broken relationship. They finally sit down and start writing that book, painting that picture, building that thing, or starting that business idea that's been sitting neglected in the corner of their mind, quietly gathering dust and accumulating doubt. They do it not because it's easy, not because the perfect moment has miraculously arrived, but because they understand, on a fundamental level, that waiting for perfect conditions is a dangerous, self-defeating game that almost never pays off. I've experienced this profound shift in my own life. There were important conversations I postponed indefinitely because I didn't want to deal with the potential discomfort or emotional vulnerability. There were letters I didn't write, apologies I didn't offer, acts of kindness I delayed because I just assumed there would always be more time, a better opportunity down the road. But when I finally made the conscious choice to stop waiting for later and simply acted, something incredibly powerful and liberating happened. The heavy weight of procrastination lifted immediately. Clarity replaced the vague, persistent feeling of regret and unresolved tension. I realized, with absolute certainty, that action, even imperfect, hesitant action, is what truly builds a life worth remembering. Intention without action remains just a wish, a phantom of what could have been. The Stoics teach us, above all else, to live fully and presently now, with a conscious awareness of the precious non-renewable nature of time. Later is a seductive illusion that comfortably lulls us into complacency right up until the point where it's suddenly, irreversibly too late. The man who chooses to act today, who refuses to leave the truly important things undone or unsaid, is the man who lives without the heavy burden of regret. And that, fundamentally, is true wisdom embodied in action. Because opportunity doesn't announce itself with a loud knock twice. Far more often, it simply fades quietly into the distance while we are busy waiting patiently for a better, more convenient time that may never arrive. That's just how I am. Finally, let's address perhaps the most subtly insidious and ultimately limiting belief a man can cling to, often summed up in the seemingly definitive phrase, "That's just how I am." It sounds like a statement of fact, doesn't it? Like a full stop at the end of a sentence, declaring your nature immutable, fixed, and unchangeable. But what this phrase truly signals, in almost every instance, is not a statement of inherent nature, but a quiet surrender. It's a decision, often unconscious, to stop growing, to stop striving for self-improvement, to accept the status quo of one's habits and reactions, no matter how detrimental they might be. Intelligent men consciously and actively avoid this mindset because they understand a fundamental truth that many people sadly ignore. We are not fixed, static beings, permanently trapped by the habits of our past, the circumstances of our upbringing, or the temperament we were born with. Who we are, the character we embody, the man we are becoming. All of this is constantly being shaped and reshaped, day by day, moment by moment, by the choices we make and the actions we choose to repeat over and over again. The moment a man declares himself incapable of change, whether it's changing a bad temper, overcoming a fear, or developing a new skill, he isn't accurately defining his inherent nature. He is, far more accurately, simply refusing to take responsibility for the ongoing process of becoming. I've seen this play out in countless forms. Perhaps it's a man who frequently loses his temper, exploding in anger, and when called out on his behavior, simply shrugs and says dismissively, "Ah, well, that's just how I am. Can't help it." Or another man who avoids deep, meaningful, emotional connection because he's uncomfortable with vulnerability, telling himself and others, "That's just who I've always been. I'm not the emotional type." These are not accurate, objective statements of fixed, unchangeable fact. They are, almost universally, sophisticated excuses. Excuses that grant permission for fear, discomfort, and inertia to masquerade convincingly as authentic self-awareness. But deep down, beneath the surface justification, what these statements truly reveal is a profound resistance. Resistance to the discomfort inherent in self-examination. Resistance to the difficult and often messy process of meaningful personal change, and a resistance to the simple, powerful reality that no man is ever truly finished becoming the person he is meant to be. The Stoics confronted this resistance head-on in their philosophy. They taught, with unwavering conviction, that we are not prisoners of our innate temperament, the circumstances of our past, or even our immediate impulses and emotional reactions. Epictetus's core teaching echoes here. It is not things themselves that disturb us but our judgments about them. Likewise, it's not our inherent nature that truly limits us. It's the limiting stories we repeatedly tell ourselves about who we are and who we believe we are capable of becoming. Make no mistake, change is undeniably uncomfortable. It requires courage. It demands honest, often unflattering self-examination. It necessitates a willingness to let go of the familiar, even when that familiarity has, paradoxically, become a source of pain, limitation, or unhappiness. But the Stoics also believed, with equal conviction, that self-mastery, the ongoing work of refining our character, our reactions, and our habits, was perhaps the highest and most worthy calling for any human being. Not because it was easy, but precisely because it was necessary for cultivating a life of genuine meaning, purpose, and tranquility. Meaningful growth demands radical honesty with ourselves. It demands that we stop accepting superficial explanations and instead ask the harder, more penetrating questions. Am I truly acting this way because it is an unchangeable, fundamental part of my core identity, an inherent how I am? Or am I acting this way simply because it feels easier, more comfortable, and less demanding than doing the necessary, often difficult work of consciously choosing to change, to respond differently, to cultivate new habits and perspectives? Intelligent men consistently choose the harder path. They recognize with profound clarity that wisdom isn't like a trophy you earn once you reach a certain age or achieve a certain level of knowledge, which you then simply display. Wisdom is an active, ongoing practice. It's a daily commitment to the process of becoming a better version of yourself, not because you hate who you are right now, but because you possess enough self-respect and vision to refuse to stay the same. If that current state is limiting your potential or harming yourself and others, in the end, uttering "that's just how I am" is fundamentally a way of closing the door on possibility, of declaring your own personal evolution complete before it truly is. But the Stoics constantly remind us that life itself is defined by change. Nature itself is a continuous process of transformation. To resist this fundamental reality is to deny the very essence of being alive, which is dynamic movement, adaptation, and growth. The man who deeply understands this doesn't fear change or rigidly resist it. He welcomes it, recognizing it as an inherent part of the journey. He sees himself not as a finished product, but as a perpetual work in progress. Unfinished. Yes, but critically willing, and it is in that willingness to engage with the process of becoming, to choose growth over comfortable stagnation, that true wisdom ultimately resides. If you've ever caught yourself saying one of these 7 phrases, maybe even today, please trust me, you are absolutely not alone. I have been there too, more times than I would ever like to admit, using these very phrases to justify inaction, excuse behavior, or avoid discomfort. But here is the incredibly good news. The heart of what Stoic training is all about. Intelligent men aren't the ones who magically never make mistakes or never utter limiting phrases. They are the ones who possess the awareness to recognize these patterns in themselves, the humility to acknowledge their impact, and the quiet strength to consciously choose to do better going forward. And that, my friends, is exactly what we are doing here together in this moment, becoming better versions of ourselves, one thoughtful choice, one conscious phrase at a time. So, as you reflect on these 7 points, which one resonated most deeply with you today? Maybe it's time to finally leave that tired old excuse of, "that's just how I am" in the past where it belongs. Or perhaps it's time to consciously retire, "I'll do it later," from your vocabulary before later inevitably transforms into never. Whatever it is, consider this moment, this realization, your personal invitation to take that crucial next step. Because wisdom isn't about achieving some mythical state of perfection. It's about the ongoing, lifelong commitment to staying curious, staying humble enough to learn from everyone and everything, and always, always choosing to move forward on the path of becoming. If today's conversation sparked something meaningful in you, if you found it valuable, please pay it forward. Share this video with a friend, a colleague, a family member who you think might be walking a similar path and could benefit from hearing this message. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way, every time I discover or share a new perspective, a new tool from Stoicism or modern life that can help us live more wisely, more meaningfully, and with greater peace, you'll be the first to know. I appreciate you being here and doing this work with me. See you in the next video.